What happens when we remove all constraints? When the laws of physics become mere suggestions, and the boundaries between possible and impossible blur into meaninglessness. In our physical world, constraints shape everything we do. The simple act of walking requires us to push against gravity, to feel the resistance of the ground beneath our feet, to navigate the limitations of our bodies and the spaces around us. These constraints aren't just restrictions, they're the very foundation of how we understand and interact with reality. But in virtual spaces, we face a peculiar paradox. We can fly, teleport, pass through walls, create something from nothing with a wave of our hand. And yet, when everything becomes possible, something profound is lost. Many virtual worlds feel empty, weightless, lacking the satisfying resistance that gives our actions meaning. This isn't just a matter of physical simulation. It's about the fundamental human need for meaningful opposition, what psychologists call optimal challenge. We see this in children at play, who instinctively create rules and obstacles even in free play. A child running across an empty field will place imaginary constraints on themselves. The ground is lava, they declare, and suddenly the simple act of movement becomes a thrilling challenge. The French philosopher Gaston Bachelard understood this deeply. In The Poetics of Space, he writes that the phenomenology of the imagination must assume the task of grasping the essentially varying image. He recognized that our imagination doesn't thrive in absolute freedom, but in the dance between limitation and possibility. When we daydream, we don't imagine formless voids. We imagine spaces with their own internal logic, their own rules and boundaries. This brings us to a crucial insight about virtual architecture. The most compelling digital spaces aren't those that offer unlimited freedom, but those that create meaningful resistance. Consider the way successful video games carefully craft their constraints. In Portal, the simple rule that you can only create 2 linked portals at a time transforms basic movement into a fascinating puzzle. In Minecraft, the effort required to gather and place blocks makes the act of creation feel weighty and significant. The implications extend far beyond gaming. As we build more of our lives in virtual spaces, from workplaces to social platforms to educational environments, we must grapple with this fundamental need for weight and resistance. A virtual meeting room that perfectly mimics physical reality might be less effective than one that creates new forms of meaningful interaction. A digital artwork that embraces and plays with its constraints might resonate more deeply than one that tries to do everything. But here's where it gets really interesting. These virtual constraints don't need to mirror physical ones. Just as abstract art found new forms of expression by breaking from literal representation, virtual spaces can discover new forms of meaningful resistance. Perhaps the weight we need isn't gravitational, but social. Maybe the boundaries aren't walls, but time, or attention, or the limits of shared understanding. The challenge for designers of virtual spaces is not to eliminate constraints, but to craft them intentionally. To create what I call meaningful weightlessness. Spaces where limitations become opportunities for creativity, where resistance fosters rather than hinders engagement. This brings us back to our original question, but with a crucial twist. The real challenge isn't what happens when we remove all constraints, but how we craft new ones that serve our deeper needs for meaning and engagement. In the weightless realm of the virtual, we must become masters, not of unlimited freedom, but of artful limitation. Because in the end, it's not the absence of weight that makes virtual spaces compelling. It's the way they let us rediscover what weight means and why we needed it all along. This has been Design Imperative. I'm Robbie. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this episode, please leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, share it with somebody who you think might like this sort of thing. If you really, really like it, Ko-Fi link down in the description. I do audiobook readings for Ko-Fi supporters over there. Plus, you get to watch these Design Imperative episodes 1 week in advance. I'll catch you guys next time. Until then, stay plugged in, stay connected. Ciao, ciao.